We'll make a start. Good afternoon and welcome to today's public meeting held here in this beautiful location on this not so sunny Hawke's Bay day. My name's Takira Lawrence and I'm a Parliamentary Services Outreach Advisor supporting the New Zealand First Leaders Office. My areas include Hawke's Bay, up to East Coast, Manawatu and Taranaki. I'm Napier based, Napier born and bred. So a little bit about my position. I'm a bit of a relationship connector between the community and the New Zealand First Office. It involves community engagement, what's happening in the New Zealand First Office, give accurate information on current policies and answer questions as best as I can. If I don't know the answer, I will find that for you. Also to feed information back to the New Zealand First Office regarding key issues and plan engagements meetings for our New Zealand First MPs. Now, enough about me, let's get back to the important stuff. Out of interest in future planning, can I ask if you can give me a show of hands just how you heard about this meeting? Did anyone see it in a newspaper ad? Yeah, cool. Email invite? Oh yeah, cool. Flyer in the mail? No. Word of mouth? Cool. Social media? Cool. Awesome, thank you. And before I forget, in case of emergency, please exit through the nearest fire exit. And if you need the bathroom, you just go through the door here and turn right. Now, today's meeting is part of New Zealand's first nationwide tour focusing on regional cities, and it marks 6 months since the 2023 general election in October. This is an important opportunity to provide you an update on the progress of our coalition agreement and what has been happening within our portfolio roles to our supporters. I would like to introduce you to our speakers, Andy Foster and Jamie Arbuckle, both List MPs. Here they are here. And after they've spoken, we'll have a question and answer time before rounding off. Now, Andy is our Wellington-based List MP as well as a first-term MP. He served Wellington for 27 years as a councillor, and he also served as a Wellington Mayor for 3 years. Yeah, he brings a significant level of local government experience to the team. He is the chairperson of the Transport and Infrastructure Select Committee, and he's also our party spokesperson for local government, education, housing, conservation, civil defence and sports and recreation. I also have the pleasure of introducing you all to Jamie Arbuckle. Jamie is the New Zealand First Whip. He is Deputy Chairperson for the Justice Select Committee and is our party spokesperson for the environment, aquaculture, horticulture, internal affairs and tourism. Based in Blenheim, this is Jamie's first term as an MP. Prior to this, he held the record for the youngest Marlborough District Councillor, where he served over 13 years in this role. With a rich history of horticulture in the family, you will still find him selling fruit at the local farmers market when he's not in Wellington or keeping up with his 4 children, along with wife and fellow District Councillor Sally. So I will hand you over to Jamie, and thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. This is a number of meetings that we're doing across New Zealand. I've already had the pleasure of speaking in Blenheim and in Nelson, and there's another couple of meetings happening as we are doing this one today. So first, just want to go through a few words from our leader, from the party and what we've been achieving in Parliament. That will take probably about 10 minutes, and what I want to do is just to go over some key policies that New Zealand First has been able to achieve so far. What I'm going to do then is just talk briefly about my role in New Zealand First. I realise I'm probably a new face to many of you in the room today. Then I'm just going to hand it over to Andy Foster, who's going to talk through his portfolio areas and just his experience of being a New Zealand First MP. What we'd then like to do is then open the floor for questions and answers. Hopefully we can answer most of those questions here on the spot today. If we can't, we will definitely get back to you with answers. But it's a good opportunity to raise concerns that you're experiencing in your community, things that you're seeing that the government's doing well or something that we can be doing better. So take that opportunity to feed into us. The other thing I'd like to say is we'd like to be doing this a couple times a year and coming around New Zealand and actually, instead of just doing this at election time, is actually connecting now and taking those issues back while we've got a chance to actually make a difference. So firstly, it has been 6 months since the 14th of October 2023, and to date our team is marking this milestone by travelling across the country to provide our supporters with an update on the progress New Zealand First is making in Parliament and in government. First, we want to thank our supporters for the opportunity we've been afforded to advance the policy program of New Zealand First and ensure the values and principles of the party are represented in Parliament and are considered when New Zealand First caucus makes day-to-day political decisions. And that's a really important part of being here today, is having that direct contact with you, our constituents, to actually take our issues directly back to caucus. This tour follows on from a massive State of Nation public meeting of over 700 attendees in Palmerston North before Easter. The turnout for the leader and the party at that event and our polling since has indicated a strong level of support. Our team has got on with the job and we're proud to be representing you and bringing a practical, pragmatic and nationalist voice to Parliament. We're also proud of our ministerial team, and to quote the Right Honourable Winston Peters, our team brings the steel to this government. That means we have the courage to have the tough conversations, to be bold with our vision and to keep moving forward despite any turbulences sent our way from the opposition, the media or other pressures. So just to recap on New Zealand First in Parliament, as many of you will be aware in this room, we were in the political wilderness from 2020 to 2023. We've returned with a caucus of 8, and 5 of those which have roles in the coalition government. Our team, led by the Right Honourable Winston Peters, includes the Honourable Shane Jones, the Honourable Casey Costello, the Honourable Mark Patterson, Jenny Marcroft, Andy Foster, Tanya Unkovich, and of course myself. The last 3 years have meant we've relied on volunteers, and this is a very important part. Volunteer effort to return and being back in Parliament. But it also means we've had access to staffing and resources that we are properly utilising to support the work of our MPs and advance the policy agenda of New Zealand First. So what we have tried to do is, through our supporters through the election time, is bring them into Parliament, bring them into our staffing ranks to actually keep the party rolling over the next 3 years. The coalition government, as many of you will be aware, is made up of National with 49 seats, ACT 11 seats, and New Zealand First with 8 seats. The coalition works through these issues collaboratively, fulfilling the commitments made in the coalition agreement. The government has had a strong start with a policy reset, when many of you would have heard of the 100-day plan, and now focusing on the action plan for New Zealand. And that action plan for New Zealand has 36 actions to be completed from the 1st of April to the 30th of June 2024. An important thing with the government is we're going to keep those action plans rolling out during the term of government, so everyone knows exactly what has been completed and when it's going to be completed. The government priorities include rebuilding the economy and easing the cost of living, restoring law and order, and delivering better public services. So New Zealand First in government, many of you will be aware the coalition agreement was signed on the 24th of November 2023, and shortly after, ministers were sworn in And our ministerial team is made up, as I mentioned, the Honourable Winston Peters, who's the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Racing, the Honourable Shane Jones, who's the Minister of Resources, Regional Development, Ocean and Fisheries, and Associate Minister of Energy and Finance, the Honourable Casey Costello, who's the Minister for Seniors, Customs, Associate Minister for Police, Health and Immigration, the Honourable Mark Patterson is the Minister for Rural Communities, the Associate Minister for Agriculture and Regional Development, and really importantly, Jenny Marcroft, the Parliamentary Undersecretary for Oceans and Fisheries, in the really important portfolio of Media and Communications. The Coalition Agreement, if you haven't seen the details of that, it's 114 commitments across a range of categories. They form the basis of our involvement in the government, and we have been steadfast in maintaining those commitments even though we face some difficult challenges. So far, we have achieved 15 of those commitments and made a start on 19 others, with 13 more commitments to be advanced during the action plan for New Zealand. And as I said, those 114 commitments, they will get rolled out in the 3-year term, so it's really important to know the timing of when those are happening. I just want to touch on two key policies. Two key policies have been the COVID inquiry. New Zealand first committed to establish and complete a full-scale, wide-ranging, independent inquiry conducted publicly and locally with international experts into how the COVID pandemic was handled in New Zealand. And this will be covering the use of multiple lockdowns, the vaccine procurement efficiency, the social and economic impact on both the regional and national levels, and whether the decisions made and the steps taken were justified. We realise the Labour-initiated inquiry into COVID-19 response lessons learned never met the scale, the independence or breadth of what the country needs for an inquiry. However, we have taken over 11,000 submissions to inform the next steps. The action plan for New Zealand indicates the next steps to be taken is the decision on the extension of the scope of that inquiry, and also the decision on the commissioners will also be considered. The Honourable Winston Peters has also taken an open letter from the New Zealand Doctor Speak Out with Science group, so that has also been tabled with us. A second policy that's really important is the Relationships and Sexuality Education Guidelines. Like all coalition agreement commitments, we remain steadfast to fulfil our promise. In order to repeal the guidelines, we must replace it with guidelines that include consent, healthy relationships, and age-appropriate sexual education. So there are two policies that have been topical as we've gone around the country, and Andy and I can speak more to those in the questions and answers. What I would like to do, and it will take just 2 to 3 minutes, is also to go through our coalition tracker. And it's a number of items, often they're things that are topical for individuals, and just to make sure that you are aware of where we are with these. So far we've achieved or having an ongoing commitment to cancel light rail in Auckland, and let's get Wellington moving. We repealed the Natural and Built Environment Act and repealed the Spatial Planning Act 2023. I'm also a Marlborough District Councillor who deals with the RMA and the Hearings Commissioner, so if that's something people want to bring up in questions and answers, can answer a little bit more on that. We've committed to the moderate increases to the minimum wage each year. We repealed the Smoke-Free Environments Regulated Products Act 1990 before March. We've kept the superannuation age at 65. By the 1st of December 2023, we reserved against the proposed amendments to the WHO health regulations to allow the incoming government to consider these against a national interest test. And there's also, in the next 4 to 6 weeks, an important thing the government again needs to answer on that as well. We've protected the freedom of speech by ruling out the introduction of hate speech legislation and stopped the Law Commission work on hate speech legislation. We required the public service departments and Crown entities to communicate primarily in English, except those specially related to Māori. We've stopped all work on hapuapua, and we commit that in the absence of a referendum, our government will not change the official name of New Zealand. We've started, and some of these I have touched on already, but just so we're all aware, we've made those amendments to the RMA. We've investigated the reopening of Marsden Point Refinery, and I think the Honourable Shane Jones has made some announcements on that in the last week. We've progressed the detailed business case for a dry dock at Marsden Point. We've progressed further work examining connecting the railway to Marsden Point in Northport from the North Main trunk line. We've investigated the strategic opportunities in New Zealand mining resources and developed a plan to develop these opportunities. We've established the Regional Infrastructure Fund, established the National Infrastructure Agency. We've ensured Immigration New Zealand is engaged in proper risk management and verification to ensure migrants are fulfilling genuine work needs. We're addressed and provided solutions for the long expressed concern of the OECD into the lack of focus into the New Zealand immigration policy. We've investigated the establishment of essential worker workforce planning mechanisms, improved the credited employer work visa and strengthened job seeker work ready obligations. We've been liberalising the genetic engineering laws and ensuring strong protections for human health and the environment. We've adequately resourced community policing, including the Māori and Pacific Warden, Community Patrol New Zealand and Neighbourhood Watch. We've stopped the first year of fees free and replaced this with a final year's fees free before 2025. We've reformed the regulations on vaping, smokeless tobacco, oral nicotine products, while banning disposable vaping products. So that is work that is underway. Very importantly, we've funded the Gumboot Friday $6 million per annum, repealed the Therapeutics Products Act 2023, updated Pharmac's decision-making model, liaisoned with retirement village owners and occupiers to seek a mutually agreed way forward to safeguard the interest of 50,000 plus New Zealanders living in retirement villages. As I mentioned, the COVID-19 response inquiry is underway, ensured a national interest test is undertaken for any agreements with the United Nations, and importantly, in the last week, we've announced we've restored the right to a local referendum on the establishment or ongoing use of Māori wards. Why I've gone through all that today is it's been an incredible journey of speed. Myself being a new MP, the amount of work that has been put in place in the last 6 months, I'd say to you, as my experience as an MP has been fast. It comes at you very, very quickly, and it's really, really hard, I know, for the general public to keep up with all the day-to-day things that are happening. So always connecting back to the website or attending meetings like this is really, really important. Just quickly, in the next couple of minutes, just really want to talk about my experience. I'm still a Marlborough District Councillor. I come from local government. I've spent 5 terms at the Marlborough District Council. I'm a hearings commissioner, as I said, around RMA, spent a lot of time in the Environment Committee and chaired the Finance and Community Committee at my council. Going into central government, that's been a really good stepping stone, but as I say, the work becoming an MP, being across the country, it's something Andy may touch on as well. Probably his experience is a little bit different coming from Mayor, but it is an extremely busy position, something that I've really enjoyed. What I do want to touch on is being the party whip. A lot of people go, what's that about? Do you get a whip? Well, you don't. But you do get to have some control over the rest of the caucus. My job is really to look after the other 7 MPs, and my standing joke is I look after 6 of them and let Winston do what he needs to do. But it is an important job of getting people where they need to be around the country, making sure that they're in the House speaking at the right time, making sure the legislation coming up, everyone knows where we're sitting, how we're voting on it, getting our spokespeople in the right place. Also, being the party whip, I get to go up to Cabinet and I see how Cabinet works and I get to see the legislation being formed 2 to 3 weeks before it comes into the House. So then I can go back to the party and explain to them what's how are we tracking on something? Does something need to have more work on it? Also get to spend time with the Speaker, with the other whips from the other parties, again organising how the House will work. Being also MP, I sit on the Justice Committee with a number of different legislation that's coming through that at the moment. Finance and expenditure, I sit on that committee as well. So yeah, you get understanding quite quickly of a lot of different legislation. You're a part of a big wheel, really, of learning. But it's something I personally really enjoyed. I'd just like to say to members here, many of you, as I know, you don't know me, but I thank you for the support, especially for the New Zealand First Party to put us back into Parliament, into government. It's made my dream come true of being an MP. Something I want to make sure the party does is to continue to connect with the people and the people that put us there. I'm going to hand it over to Andy. He will speak for probably 10 minutes on what he does, and then, as I say, the question and answers. But thank you very much.
Put my timer on just so I make sure that I don't speak for too long. First of all, thanks, Jamie, and thank you all for coming out, giving up some of your Saturday afternoon. It's great to see you all here, and hopefully we can have a good conversation. I'm just going to start off by saying, obviously, this is 6 months in for us as a new government. I see us having a duty of trying to make sure that we're there for a good long time so we can fix some of the mess that we've been left behind and we don't end up going back into another mess. But what I do want to say is we are, in New Zealand First, we're all list MPs. So we don't actually have an electorate, but I say that my electorate starts at North Cape and ends at the Bluff. It is everybody, is every New Zealander. We're here for every New Zealander, and part of our job is, as Jamie sort of alluded, is to get out and about and to talk to, but even more importantly, to listen to New Zealanders right across the country, so we're understanding where things are at for you, where things are at for businesses, where things are at for communities, so that we can then respond to those things and to try and make sure that we do the best job that we can for you, because we are supposed to be your government. When we were elected, it'd be fair to say we knew that the country was in a mess, and that's why I think we had a change of government. We had a historic situation where we had a one-party government. Labor had received a historically high level of votes under MMP. No other party had ever been able to form a government on its own, and yet in the space of 3 years they managed to blow that so badly that they've lost literally half of their caucus. And that, why was that? There were a whole lot of things that New Zealanders knew up and down the country were going wrong. So I'm going to touch on a little bit about that. I'm going to touch on a little bit about what I see as one of the most important things that we need to be doing, and that's a government priority around trying to build our economy and our productivity. And then I want to talk to you a little bit about the 2 select committees that I'm on, including the one I chair, which is Transport and Infrastructure, and a couple of the areas of my portfolio responsibilities. So just to say, first of all, in terms of what we inherited, we all know that there's a cost of living crisis. That cost of living crisis is partly there's an international context. There's obviously COVID and all the challenges that brought, but partly if you're looking at the inflation numbers, those inflation numbers now are largely driven by local inflation. They're not international. International inflation is now coming down quite well, but local domestic inflation is staying stubbornly high. And a large part of that is because we have borrowed a lot of money. Now, some of that was necessary to borrow during COVID, when we were all in the situation of having to stay home, but we still wanted to make sure that the government at the end of the day wanted to make sure that people had an income. That was the right response to make at the time, but they kept doing it beyond when it was justifiable. And of course, when you borrow money, one day you've got to pay it back. And that's what we're doing at the moment. We're paying it back. We're paying it back in high interest rates, high inflation, which are two linked things, and obviously a high debt level, which is weighing on our economy. So those things are a result of direct government policy, which we've had to fix. And then there was all the money that got the previous government. Basically, its approach was to say, well, we're spending more money. We want to do good stuff, so we're going to spend some more money on that. We're going to spend some more money on that. We're going to spend some more money on that. What they didn't do, though, was to say we're going to get an outcome from that money. And so we are very resolutely focused on making sure that we're about outcomes. It's not about spending 100 million more than a billion more than a billion more there. It's about the outcomes that you get. And I think the second part of why the last government was turfed out was the quality of the results that they were getting. And you look at them in terms of the people's safety, people's feeling of safety and crime, clearly went backwards. You look at the health system. We all know that the health system has gone backwards. That is a major challenge for us to address. And the education system, well, we have been sinking and sinking and sinking in terms of you cannot teach young people who are not actually at school. That doesn't work. So we've got to get the kids back to school. We've got to be teaching them the things that they need to learn, and that's why you've got to focus, A, on dealing with truancy and on not attending, and B, on dealing with making sure that our young people, because they are our future, they're their future, they're also our future, that our young people are learning the things that they need to be good New Zealand citizens, but also to be good competitive citizens of the world. So all of those things are real challenges that we faced as a community. And I might also pick one more in the economic area, which is that at the moment, does anybody want to hazard a rough guess at what our balance of payments deficit is at the moment per year? Have a wild guess, somebody? 10 million? 10 billion? Yeah, close enough. At least you're in the billions, right? At the moment, we're spending $8.8 billion a year in debt servicing. That's the government's debt servicing, so that's the amount of money the government has borrowed. But we're spending $30 billion more a year, $30 billion more a year as a nation than we're earning. You can't keep doing that. That effectively means for every man, woman and child in New Zealand, we are effectively borrowing about $6,000 a year to pay for our lifestyle. So that which brings me to the second thing. We have to grow our productivity. New Zealand, when I was a kid, New Zealand was ranked in the top 3 countries on the planet in terms of our GDP per capita, the amount we earn per capita. We're now down somewhere in the 30s. If we had kept at the place of being in those top 3, we'd be up with Switzerland. Each of us would be earning something like, our incomes would be something like 2/3 higher than they are today. So if you earned 50,000, instead of earning 50,000, do the maths, you'd be 2/3 better than that. You'd be up sort of 80 or 90. We wouldn't be having half of the conversations that we're having about the services that we want to be able to afford. We're having the conversation at the moment about the police. How much do the police get? Are we able to pay the police? And obviously we need to pay the police really, really well. We also need to pay the nurses well, the engineers well, the doctors well. We need to pay everybody well, because if we don't do that, people start looking, as we've heard about the police, they will start looking and say, well, Queensland looks pretty good because I can get paid more and maybe a better job. So we have to grow our productivity, because if we don't do that, we will continue to lose the people that we really need to keep, and we will continue to not be able to afford the services that we want to do. And we can't just keep taking more and more money off us all as taxpayers, because we've got to be able to afford to live and have a decent quality of life as well. So we must grow productivity. And so that takes me to a couple of things that I really want to touch on too. I chair the Transport and Infrastructure Select Committee. And I'm also a member of the Governance Administration Select Committee. So I'll deal with Governance Administration first. It deals with a whole sort of grab bag of stuff, everything from the Department of Internal Affairs to Stats, to the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, to NEMA, FENS, Fire and Emergency New Zealand, all those quite a grab bag of organisations. But one thing I do want to touch on is, because it's been such a big issue for this part of the country, is emergency management. And you lived through it. Obviously, tragic, huge damage to the community, and I know that that recovery job is not by any stretch finished. But what was really clear when we were quizzing the DPMC, Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, we were quizzing NEMO, we were quizzing DIA, is that every time we have an emergency, some major disaster, so it might be it's an earthquake in Kaikoura, it might be it's Cyclone Gabrielle, it might be it's the Canterbury earthquakes, we start almost from scratch to set up our response to that. And so the question that we've got in our minds is that the right way to do this? Are there better ways of making sure that we're prepared for an emergency? Takira was telling us about her experience of the response, on the ground response to the emergency, and a lot of things essentially haven't been made up as you go. How do we engage with the community as well? How do we engage with the councils? So there's a lot better that we can do, and that's the kind of thing that we should be thinking about as a government, is trying to make sure that we are as best prepared as we can be for a disaster like that. The other thing I wanted to touch on was the other select committee is the Transport and Infrastructure Select Committee. And we've all heard about the infrastructure deficit, whether it's in water, whether it's in roading, whether it's in bridges, whether it's in resilience, whether it's in all the hospitals being run down, the police stations which have got mould on the walls, all of those sort of things. What is very, very clear is that our asset management is abysmal in New Zealand. Local government's better than central government, but our asset management is poor, and what that means is that you just leave the asset, they're sitting there for a period of time, and then suddenly you go to say, oh, actually they're all falling down. They're all old. This isn't very good. So we've got some work to do in terms of asset management. There's also what we build. And the Infrastructure Commission, who are a great organisation, came to my select committee. We've just been going through a thing which we call the annual review. That's how have these organisations performed over the last 12 months. And they said to us, actually, we're investing roughly the right amount, roughly the amount that the OECD average in infrastructure, but we're not getting the value out of it. And that is, there are a number of things there. One is we're investing in the wrong things. And I would say, and hopefully none of the superiors will hear this, but I would say sometimes political decisions are probably the worst ones. The politician says, hey, I want to build a bright new shiny thing there, but it's possibly the wrong thing. So we've got to get much better at our business planning. And the other things that are holding us back there are that our processes for delivering them are really, really poor. So the resource management processes. So we've got the fast track bill. And that's a good thing to fast track things, to make sure that the process is much more efficient. But we do have to make sure we don't destroy the environment while we're doing that, because that is a huge, huge asset that New Zealand's got. I've just been in Taiwan, and they're looking at New Zealand. It's a beautiful country. It's a wonderful country. We do not want to damage those things, because if we do that, our reputation will be damaged, and there's a real value to our reputation. And the other one is just the cost of doing work, the cost of working on the roads. Who loves orange road cones? Probably not many of us. But the reality is there's a real cost to that. We just had an inquiry in a very short inquiry. It was just about a simple pedestrian crossing in Auckland, where a $500,000 crossing, $170,000 of that cost, and there was all sorts of drainage stuff, $170,000 that cost was in traffic management. And Auckland Transport said to us, well, this is replicated across a whole lot of different places. But what they'd then done is, when they got a little bit of pressure on it, they said, well, actually, we'll have a look at this. And they then went back and looked at a whole bunch of other projects, and they actually cut the cost of them in half. Now, imagine how much money that we could save across New Zealand if we could do those things better. That will be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, which we can then build more infrastructure and we can return that to better schools, better hospitals, whatever it might be. So we've got a lot of work to do, but we are on the job, and we're wanting to make sure that we get the best possible value that we can out of every dollar that we have as a government that we take from you, is to be invested back in our country to make it the best possible country that we can. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions, and I look forward to answering them. Thank you very much. We both start here. Jim, come over here. Yeah. Right. Who's going to start us off the questions? And if you want to say if you can tell us what your name is, and then and who your question's for. If it's both of us, it's fine. We'll work it out. Hi, Richard.
I've only just moved up here about 18 months ago, but I was doing the Hawke Valley.
Okay, cool.
It's just a couple of questions. Get back to roading for starters. is there any audits done on the value that we're getting from the roadworks? Because I see these signs on the thing, roadworks finished, roadworks end. I never even see the start. It's a joke. I mean, the roading in this country is appalling. I mean, the time it takes to do things, it's not transmission gully, besides that. It's just that, like the Masterton Road, going from Masterton to Carlton, took years. It just needed resealing, for God's sake, you know, it just takes it. And also, there's a couple of other things. Immigration. We've got a massive amount of people coming in from China and India and a few other places, mostly those two countries. To me, it appears it's a bit out of balance with what's coming in. I'm not racist because I've got Samoan granddaughters and I've got married nephews and I've got a Chinese doctor. So I'm not a racist at all. But it just seems to me it's just too much of one or two different races. But besides that, we've got an issue with infrastructure. But in housing, where's all these people going to go? We've got people living just over here in the temporary buddy housing.
Yeah, we know. We've been told, yeah.
You know, so it's just a mess. And also a couple other little things. Tax creep, taxes. They haven't been altered for years, and even people who are just about on $20 or $30 an hour are going into another bracket because of tax creep. You know? And I'd like to see something done about that. And my big one now, this one I'll finish up this, is KiwiSaver. 3% is not enough for when you get to retirement. I see that over the next 5 to 10 years, it should go up to at least 6% from the employee and employer. Because I was in Vens for 46 years, and we ended up having a scheme, and it has made me rich, but it's made my life okay. And I would like to think that everybody in New Zealand would be the same. But you know, I've got a friend who's got about $100,000 and he's 67. And is that going to last him the next 20 years?
It's not going to be enough. It's not going to be enough. No. Richard, thank you for those questions. So starting off with roading, so what we did with that little inquiry is we're going to use that inquiry to then go to NZTA and say, well, let's talk about the whole thing of working on the roads. They have said to us already, because we've had them in too, they have said to us already that they are, it used to be a one-size-fits-all, and they're moving towards from one size fits all to we will do a different approach for, you know, if it's a little local road versus it's a major highway or whatever. So they know that they've got to get more efficient on that, and there will be pressure on them and a focus on making sure that we do that. Second question, immigration, you're 100% right. Labor went from basically doors absolutely closed during COVID, obvious reasons, and they kept them closed possibly a little bit harder than they could have been, to then basically throwing the doors open. You've probably seen the coverage of going, well, immigration were effectively either instructed or sort of that the pressure was on them to just basically rubber stamp everything. And so the net migration is about 130 odd thousand. If you look back in time, at least as far as I can see, the next highest is around 65 to 70. So overnight we went from closed to throw the doors open completely. That's nuts. It doesn't matter where people come from. So because really what we want to do is, and I mean, we weren't just getting high skill migrants, we were getting all sorts of skill levels, which is not what we want. So I've only been saying this for 40 years, that we need an immigration strategy, and it was great. I'd go back to the Infrastructure Commission. The Infrastructure Commission has said exactly the same thing. Okay, hallelujah, because if you don't have a strategy around why do you want immigration? So what's the purpose of it? What are you trying to do because of, through it? And then, so how many people do you need? What skills do you need? What ages do you need? Now, one of the things there, of course, is that issue of we are an ageing population at the moment. That won't always be true. So I'm starting asking for some research information around that, is what does the trajectory look like? Not just for 30 years, but for 50, 60, 70, because that starts telling you the age profile of the people that you might want to come in, so as we make sure that we don't end up with an even bigger baby boom, if you like, or end of baby boom, if you like. So we've got to be thinking very, 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 very scientifically and very, very thoughtfully about this. And then where do you want people to go? Do you want 2/3 of our migrants going to Auckland? Yeah. Auckland was on track at one stage to be the biggest city, bar one, I think it was Doha from memory, the biggest city, bar one, on the planet in comparison to its host population. And you go, well, if you're right out at one end, that probably suggests you ought to ask the question, is that a smart place to be? You see KiwiSaver, look, that's not a policy position that we've got, but we do need to save more for retirement. So we've got to think about that. How do we incentivise saving? At the moment, we probably disincentivise it in many cases, because we as a country take that 30 billion again that we were talking about, 30 billion balance of payments deficit. That is not goods. That is services and investment by and large. And that means basically what we've been doing is we've been borrowing money from other people or selling assets, which we then got to pay a return on. And so to improve our collective wealth, we've got to be saving and investing. And then the final point you asked was about the third point you made. The three. It was a very important one, but yeah, okay. So tax, tax creep. You're 100% right, tax creep, and that's why. So when the government gets pinged at the moment for giving money back to its rich mates. Well, those tax cuts which are planned to come in, they start at the first dollar. They are really targeted at the people on the bottom end and the middle. They're not targeted at the top. And that is a part, but only a small part, of starting to deal with those tax creep. And the tax creep issue is one that New Zealand First believes we should be incrementally changing. At the moment we can't afford to, but we do need to be in that place. Right. Next question.
Can I grab a question? Alan Frame. I was talking about that immigration. See what's happened over in America, of course, the southern border there. You just compare that with what they're going through, and of course Europe. We're finding a high proportion of deaths among athletes recently are due to strokes and heart attacks. That, along with a thing called no-cause mortality. This is a recent event, and over the past 3 years, I wonder what's caused that. That's why an inquiry to efficacy and safety of the jab is necessary. Also, the commissioners into the COVID inquiry need to be independent, and they won't be, because they've been already given these jobs before the coalition came in.
I disagree with you on that. That's something that we have pushed back on, so that the commissioners have not been announced.
That's my question. Professor Tony Blake is far from independent, and he needs to be replaced. So I recommend starting again. What are your thoughts? Okay, there's your thoughts.
Yeah, so we have announced the COVID inquiry that I touched on, and the importance is the independence. And I agree. I think everyone in this room is aware of what some of the inquiries are telling us overseas. The thing I just say to this room really firmly is when we look at the scope, we can't open this up that far that we are struggling years down the track to get a report. We want to have a report in people's hands by the end of this year. And we want to target those key things, and some of those are what you've said. We have a ridiculous, and this is a personal statement, but we do have a ridiculous situation at the moment where COVID jabs are still getting promoted. And that is something, we've got information, but we need that information done in a report that we can actually act on it. It's probably the hardest thing to stand here as a New Zealand First member and as the party, but if we don't go through this process, so the process needs to be concise, it needs to be targeted on those key elements, and the report needs to be in your hands and in my hands as soon as possible, so we can actually start pushing back against some of this.
And new personnel.
But the personnel is, and that's why when you read on our website, we say independent and even overseas experts, because some of the overseas experts are actually the people that will give us that independence.
And if I can just say, it might be a little bit confusing. It's almost a little bit confusing to us as well, because you've still got the old inquiry taking submissions, and look, there might be some very useful stuff in that, and then you've got submissions on the new inquiry and the terms of reference for the new inquiry. So they're both happening exactly at the same time. So, but we'll get there. Very important.
Would Tony Blake be replaced?
Look, there's no decisions being made, but I suspect that there are a lot of people who won't have any confidence at all in the inquiry if we don't make some changes in personnel. That would be my suspicion.
Yeah, John Gillen, I'm a resident of Napier, but I was in Hastings when I arrived here from Wellington. On a similar issue, we've got the Director General of Health mandating the use of fluoride, starting in Hastings. how is it that the research and the evidence on that goes back decades, but all the recent research shows that it's a neurotoxin, that it lowers IQ in children, and all the other science. How is it that the Director General of Health has had the power to direct the mandating of a medical procedure on a whole town of Hastings, when all the science says hold off, like Nelson, hold off till the investigation and the science has been considered? Same thing with COVID. We've got government mandating things that are injurious to our health, and no one's demanding any kind of inquiry or legal process, or it's just being imposed on us.
We've made both answer this. So if you just go back to New Zealand First policy, has always been a referendum, and we always believe that should be done at a local level. So the Director General, we actually believe that decision making should go back to the council table around that issue. It's an issue that's been raised at both of my other public meetings. It's something that I'll take back to caucus, but it's something New Zealand First has strongly always said must be a referendum of your community.
The difficulty with that is that I understand that the councillors, if they don't follow the ruling, are civilly liable.
I don't know about the civilly liable, but what I do know is that, I'm going to, if that is New Zealand First policy, I'm going to say that my track record is not aligned with it, and that is, as local government, we just said, and this was across the board, local government said, we are not experts in this, we don't know enough about it, we do not want to have to make the decision. And so please, it's not often that local government says to central government, please take this power away from us and you make the call, because you guys know better than we do. So that's where it actually ended up. So local government New Zealand actually said to central government, please, can you make the decision? And that was a few years ago.
Yeah, so you can...
Well, it's actually more terrifying to have local government make decisions which it hasn't got a clue about. That's really scary.
But then if you see what happened in the last couple of years, it's been very terrible here in New Zealand. Really.
Well,
because that was done by...
Yeah. Yeah, but can I make the observation, would you have had local government make the decision around COVID? No, and I think you'd say that would be absolutely batty. So basically what we said is, we want, as local government, we want to stick within our lanes, we want to stick to the stuff that we actually know about. And I can remember we had lots of people making submissions on fluoride, and we're kind of going, look, you're telling us all this stuff, we haven't got the time, the resources, the energy, anything to be able to investigate that. We don't want to have to make the decision on this. Central government, please, can you take that one off us? Yeah.
Yes, Duncan Watson. First of all, congratulations on what you're doing. And I'm particularly impressed with Winston as Minister of Foreign Affairs.
He's doing a great job.
And focusing on the issues which are relevant to New Zealand rather than just being an ambassador for Indigenous people. And so I think that's excellent. A couple of local issues here, and it's common throughout New Zealand, I think, and Andy, this is probably up your area in terms of infrastructure, is the rates increase throughout New Zealand. I can afford to pay the extra rates, but what really pisses me off is when I see the priorities which local councils throughout New Zealand are where they put that money. Now, we've got big issues here with Three Waters, with sewage of water discharging into the estuary and things like that. But it appears as though most of the increase, or most of the revenue here, is being applied for building a new council chambers, building a new library, building a bloody museum for technology, and more cycleways. They're not dealing with infrastructure. But that's not just a Napier issue, I think it's a national issue. So I think that's something which New Zealand First has to nail down, that there has to be, all councils should have priorities for expenditure, and it's not more cycleways, to be quite frank. But one other issue which it's just a suggestion, being an old age pensioner now, and I don't need the money, but thank you very much.
Far too young to be called an old age.
I'm very grateful for the fortnightly payouts. But there seems to be a digital gap now with technology and a lot of pensioners are just being left behind. You know, what brought home to me the other day was I was trying to put an ad to sell a boat on Trade Me, and it took me 2 days, you know, just to get my ad on Trade Me. And I know a lot of old age pensioners who they don't even have a credit card or a debit card, and where do they go? You know, they don't know anything about apps. And there seems to be, in the old days you used to have, what was it called, you go to night school. But there seems to be a big need out there for the elderly to introduce them to smartphones and computers, and I don't know how it can be done, but there's a lot of people who are just in a digital desert out there, and it's going to get worse. So I just leave it with you, and thank you. I think you're doing an excellent job.
Thank you. Thank you. Look, you're 100% right about the digital divide, and do you have something like a senior net or organisation like that in the Bay?
Yes, it is, but
not quite doing what you want it to do.
They're not dealing with this issue.
Yeah, but I think that there certainly is a need to try and work out how to do that, and that's one we'll take back and give some thought to. Different jurisdictions will do that slightly differently. Sometimes that's a council-funded thing, which you might say is one of those things that maybe councils shouldn't be doing, but I would argue that sort of social service is very, very important. So look, we'll take that back and think about it. In terms of where councils invest money in infrastructure, I'm thinking very much about that. As I mentioned asset management before. The question I've asked the Office of the Auditor General about, because they come in and they give us advice on all of these things, is that they have said that councils across, and this is across the board, have been investing in water assets at around 70 to 80% of, so the renewals, the replacement of old pipes, etc., is at about 80% or less for the last decade and a half of the depreciation rate. Now, if you were basically replacing it to keep it at the level, it should be at 100%. And so the question I've asked them, and I'm looking forward to getting that information because I only asked them a week or so back, is how often have you called councils out for that and said you are really underinvesting? We're going to qualify your audit. In other words, they're really saying we're not just whispering to you, we're telling you this is a problem. And the obvious other thing is to say, how often have you done that to government agencies who are actually worse than councils, by and large, and that's why I mentioned asset management is a really big issue. If you put pressure on councils by saying you must do your asset management properly, it starts focusing minds on what needs to be done as opposed to what's wanted to be done. And that's a really, really important thing. Three waters, because that's part of that thing. The standard that Labor had aspired to was, in my view, unaffordable, and they gold-plated it. So I think that they're talking about 160, 180 billion, that I'm sure that we can claw a fair bit of that back, and we're going to have to claw a fair bit of that back. But there's also some councils, mayors, etc., and the Labor Party seem to be saying rates are going to go up because you, the current government, have rejected three waters. Yeah, that's probably true, but who was going to pay if the rate payers didn't? Was there a magic money tree somewhere that somebody was going to come right down from on high and pay for water? No, they weren't. Do you know who was going to pay? Water consumers. Now, hands up in the room who uses water and is a water consumer. Yeah, I bet you it's everybody. Okay, so it's basically robbing Peter to pay Paul. So anybody who says that this is driving rates increases. I suspect what it would do is, because if you take rates away from the water away from councils, so councils' rate bill will probably drop 25-30%. Councils are going, okay, God, we look pretty good, don't we? We can go and what can we do? Oh, we can spend some more money on other stuff. Awesome, but you're still going to end up with a bill for water, and so actually you will end up paying more probably, because you'll end up with a water bill and a rates bill, and the rates bill's now got a whole bunch of other stuff too. So we've got some serious work to be done in that area, and we are doing that work to make sure that we do, as it's called, local water done well. But we need to do it with you, and we also need to make sure that it is local communities who control their water, not big entities, and not the co-governance model.
We'll have the last couple of questions before we finish. If you could make it a little bit brief, sorry.
Well,
We're on a deadline.
Andy, you mentioned about the environment, and I'm just really concerned about what Shane Jones has been saying, and not listening to test tube waving white-coated scientists. Now, that was in relation to the Kermadec Reserve. So that scares me, because on one hand you're saying we need to look after the environment, he's saying something completely different. What have you got to say about that?
How am I going to answer this one without getting myself in serious trouble back home? I'll be fine here. But look, I'm told that when you remember Shane said, if it's about Freddie the Frog, and if there's a mine and goodbye Freddie and all that sort of stuff. I'm told by some friends of mine, because I was in the background of that, he said you look horrified. So it might well have been true. I'm responsible for the conservation portfolio. I'm a foundation trustee of Zealandia, the wildlife sanctuary in Karori. I've also driven the creation of outer green belts. I'm a tramper and a hiker and all those sort of things. So the environment matters. I think there are going to be a lot of submissions which we've made. Those submissions on the fast track legislation closed on yesterday. Closed yesterday. So those are obviously going to have to be digested. So the legislation is not an act at this stage, it's a bill. The intent is clear. If I might say somewhat provocatively, the bill needs some improvement in terms of its drafting. It's a bit messy in places. But it is lacking in those environmental protections. And I think it's going to be an interesting debate in the House about how that happens. And I think it's something which we need to think about, because we don't have to throw away the environment to get better economic performance. If we can do both, we'll be in a much, much better place. So that's a discussion still to be had.
That's not what Shane is saying.
Look, I realise that, so we're going to have a discussion. He's higher up the rank than I am, though.
It is good to see that New Zealand are trying to become more energy efficient, and especially looking for more oil, more coal and so forth. That's very important for our energy independence. We can't do it just with electricity. Okay, we've got to use those other things, and it's by putting the cart before the horse.
Look, you are right, and I think, as I said earlier, the processes sometimes that we've had to go through have been so labyrinthine, so expensive, that it's killing us. But somehow we've got to get that balance right, and that's really got to be the trick. And I've no doubt that whatever we decide in the space, not everybody's going to be happy.
Okay, so I'm wanting to ask a question about the puberty blockers.
Yes.
I know that there's something happening in the Ministry of Health. They are looking at it. There's lots of other countries which we have followed going into the gendering stuff, like Norway, Finland, the Scandinavian countries, the Netherlands. They are all saying there's red flags all over the place, we need to change things, but it seems as if in New Zealand we are trying to hold back. I've actually, the Minister for Mental Health has actually said, oh no, we don't want to be homophobic or whatever. So I'm kind of worried about, we're not following other countries, the science, and like we should, because, and the same for the fluoride in the water. There's so many countries all over the world that say, first, that is a medical thing, so we're being fed a medical thing into our bodies, and we don't have a choice. So it's about our freedom of choice. That is my issue with fluoride.
I just, during the campaign, I think we had a lot of family first values put into the New Zealand First Manifesto, and there's a meeting I attended a couple of nights ago, Let Kids Be Kids, and that's something that is travelling around the country at the moment. And with the puberty blockers, that's something that's definitely on our radar. It's definitely a concern that's being raised, something that our caucus will be pushing back on. And I think if you go to that core value about our children being children, that's where New Zealand First will end up on this issue. There's no doubt the science and the overseas, it's definitely being pushed back at, and we fully understand that. So if you've got information on that, please share it, but it is definitely something that New Zealand First will be pushing back on.
There was a fairly big, just quickly, there was a very substantial UK report that I was reading during the week, which was exactly saying the same thing as Jamie's saying. Yeah. I think it's better. Is this the last one?
Same rights as the last one. I just wanted to ask about the RSA. When is that actually going to be looked at?
Yeah, so it's right now. What we ask of anybody, and I've been asking as we're going around the meetings, there is people in that area that we need to come up with new guidelines, and that's basically what's being drafted at the moment. If you do have ideas of what needs to go into those guidelines, please feed it in. Just feed it in through Te Kira and through New Zealand First. It is being worked on. The sooner we can get the new guidelines up and implemented, I think we'll all be feeling a lot better.
Do you know of a timeline for that?
It's a now question, like it's now, it's being drafted as we are here, so I would expect probably in the coming months for that legislation to be coming to the House, or the rules around it to be changing. So as I say, that the time of it is now to be getting in and voicing.
So it could be for next year's children. We're
Well,
on the cusp of removing our children from school.
Yes.
We're so upset.
Let us take that, because I haven't got the exact time frame, but all I do know is it's work that's happening right at this moment, and I know and it's not the exact answer you want, but it's something that needs to be implemented and changed as soon as possible. Yeah. Yes.
Should we take one more to Kira? Yep. Two more. Let's take two more. Come on. People have come a long way. So.
My name's Jack.
Hi, Jack.
As I was driving here, there's one thing I was concerned about. I don't know what the terminology is, but I understand. I try not to read. I don't listen to media, the mainstream media. But I was learning about the sovereignty of New Zealand, whether or not, medically speaking, it'll give its sovereignty up to the World Health Organization. How is that? Is there going to be a vote on that in May? Is it coming up?
So that's been raised across the country, so you're correct that is coming up again for us to have to make a decision. I mentioned that in my earlier address. We've reserved our right at the moment not to actually say halt. We want to have a national interest test in this. My understanding from New Zealand First is that we will push back and say no, but we have to also get the support of our other coalition partners. And so it's an ongoing discussion. It's something that's being raised constantly as we go around. So again, feed that in, but it's something through the campaign we've been very strong about, that New Zealand sovereignty should stay. It's the MPs that you elect should be making the decisions, not the decisions being made from outside sources. These are now questions. Like if we don't make a decision, I believe it's, someone said the other, don't quote me, I think it was 6 weeks' time, might be 4 weeks' time. If we don't make a decision, then we're bound. It's automatic. It's automatic. So these aren't things that we're going to have time for referendums. This is a time to put the government at account, and our manifesto said we would not support outside WHO, WEF, all the acronyms that you want to think of, making the decisions for our country. It would be the politicians that would be doing that.
On whose authority is all this pushing? Is it the UN and Helen Clark cohort doing this?
I suspect we've already signed up to some things.
If you go, and again I go back to that meeting that I attended the other night, it was actually very well articulated. If you go back after, I think it was 1945 or something, after the World War and stuff, some of these things around UN and all this stuff was created for other reasons, and it's been hijacked. That's the simple word for it. Started off on one purpose and it's changed to something absolutely different. What we need to be doing as New Zealanders is pushing back and going, we are making the decisions for our country.
I think what's happened is that the government has signed up to things that will become automatic at some point in time in the future, and when that point in time is coming up, if you don't actually say, well tai-ho, then it kicks in. So I think that's, I don't know which government, I suspect it was the last one. It certainly wasn't this one, but I suspect it was the last one, and that means those times click over and you go, oh, we're in, as opposed to, hang on, whoa, we didn't want to be in that one. I would take that one last question. Yeah.
I'm Malcolm Richards. I am one of 2 people who tried to take a case of torture in New Zealand, and the Attorney General refused to let us. We went to the UN, won a case, and in 2 weeks' time now, at the periodic review of New Zealand, because none of your leaders will see us, our request for trade sanctions against New Zealand will be made clear.
So,
You don't know nothing about it, do you?
No, we're all going, and I'm not just us, we're going, no idea.
Winston refuses to meet. Seymour refuses, and that other fella, what's his name?
Look, it sounds like it might be quite a story behind it, so happy to talk about that afterwards.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks, Malcolm. Right. Was that us? Yes. Takira, do you want to close us off and just say thank you?
So I'll just close us off. If you didn't take one of our newsletters on your way in, please feel free to take one with you when you leave. And at the back here where the free post is, if you do want some communication by email, there's a little area there. And if you can tick there's a few options there. What's your 3 biggest issues that you're concerned about? And what is the single most important issue facing New Zealand that the government should focus on? It's just a small little questionnaire. And if you want to complete it soon, and I can also submit them for you. And I'd just like to thank you all for taking the time out of your busy lives to come down and listen in, and also for your input as well. Thank you again, and please go safe. God bless and have a good weekend. Thank you.